Hey y'all, we are the Stewarts. My husband, Russell, is an artist, and I am May, and I have an interest in true crime. We decided to merge our two interests together. Enjoy this calming visual while listening to a tragic story. This is Stew Art and Crime. Shh! Stop what you are doing and listen closely. I have a secret to tell you, but you can't tell anyone. Did hearing that make you a little excited? Or have feelings of stress? What actually happens when you must keep a secret? What does this do to you physically and emotionally? First, let's go back to basics. A secret is any piece of information that is intentionally hidden from someone else. There are several different kinds of secrets. 1. A person gains a strategic advantage from having information that other people don't have. 2. The information would have negative consequences for the secret holder if it were more widely known. Or 3. The information would have negative consequences for other individuals if they found out about it. Throughout my research into the effects of keeping secrets can have on someone, I came across some studies that were conducted around 2016. According to psychologist Art Markman, our minds have a limited capacity to process information, and secret keeping requires some mental multitasking. He stated further that there can also be a temptation to get a reaction from someone by telling them about something you know and they don't. It's the same impulse you would get when seeing a movie on opening night and then posting to social media how it was the best movie out this last year. Like for me, it was Love and Monsters, an amazing movie starring Dylan O'Brien. Seriously, so good, go watch it. Alright, back to the psychologist, who explains, that's the dual pincer difficulty of keeping a secret. Doing so unburdens your mind from having to keep track of what other people know and don't know, and gives you the oh-so-delightful social reward of surprising others. For better or worse. A paper published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology revealed that the average person is keeping 13 secrets right now. And from that, 5 are secrets they have never told to anyone. These results came about from their research over 10 different studies that involved over 13,000 secrets. The researchers asked participants if they were keeping any of 38 different common categories of secrets, which ranged from infidelity to financial secrets to secret hobbies. The most common secrets that people shared with no one were extra-relational thoughts, thinking something romantic or sexual about someone other than your partner, romantic desire, sexual behavior, and lies. Most research up until this point focused on the concealment of secrets, people interacting in a lab with one person trying to keep something from the other. But in the studies I just mentioned, it was observed that the actual act of hiding, the moment a person makes up a lie or changes the subject, or simply omits certain information from a conversation, proved to be only a minor part of the experience of having a secret. Instead, what seems to affect people much more is how often they think about the secret. A professor at Columbia Business School, Michael Slepian, who is the lead author on this paper, stated, "We actually don't encounter many situations where we have to hide our secrets relative to all the times a secret will just come into our thoughts and intrude upon our thinking." Further explaining, people have this curious way of talking about secrets as laying them down or unburdening them. We found that when people were thinking about their secrets, they actually acted as if they were burdened by physical weight. It seems to have this powerful effect even when they're not hiding a secret in the moment. Earlier research on secrecy linked one to a lower well-being. During the new research, another reason, more specific to secrecy, came about that. Thinking of secrets means thinking of things you aren't being open and honest about in your relationships, which makes people feel less authentic. In these new studies, the researchers never found that concealing secrets lowered well-being. Only thinking about them did, with Professor Slepian determining the bad news is that even when you don't have to hide your secret, you might still frequently think about it to the detriment of your well-being. This leads us to the case we are going to discuss today, the murder of Chester Garrett. Major Chester Garrett was born on July 19, 1941, in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, and raised in Puerto Rico. He graduated in 1958 from Antilles High School, U.S. Naval Station, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and was a star baseball player at his school. He was scouted by 15 major league clubs and signed with the Chicago Cubs. Pitched for them for 1 year, but suffered an injury, which pushed him to leave professional baseball and pursue a career in the military, starting in 1960 as an enlisted infantryman. At the age of 23, Chester Garrett married Lisbeth Floyd, 25, on September 7, 1963, and adopted her 5-year-old son, Roger. After completing officer candidate school in 1963, Garrett served in the 187th Infantry Regiment at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, from 1963 to 1964, as a rifle platoon leader and mortar platoon leader. He then completed the Special Forces officer course in April 1965 and was later selected as the recipient of the Brig General William O. Darby Memorial Award as the Distinguished Graduate in Ranger Class 9-70, and his son Patrick was also born in 1965. He then spent 4 tours in Vietnam. During this time, he became the commanding officer of the Green Beret Special Forces Camp at Bu Dap, South Vietnam. On January 14, 1967, Captain Garrett led an operation against the Vietnam Congress, which resulted in 200 enemy fatalities, also saving the life of a fellow soldier, and was recommended for special awards for his bravery. By the time Garrett was 28 years old, he had been decorated 10 times for his service in South Vietnam from June 1966 through August 1967. These awards included the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, Army Commendation Medal, Vietnamese Honor Medal, Soldier's Medal, Vietnamese Gallantry Cross, Purple Heart with Cluster, Air Medal, and Vietnam Service Medal. In 1968, Garrett was awarded the nation's second highest award, the Distinguished Service Cross at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, for extraordinary heroism in Vietnam. Captain Garrett distinguished himself by exceptionally valorous actions on February 3, 1967, while serving as Special Forces advisor to a Vietnamese strike force on a search and destroy mission near the Cambodian border. Early in the morning, his unit was savagely attacked and pinned down by a North Vietnamese battalion firing machine guns, mortars, and small arms. Completely disregarding his own safety, Captain Garrett dashed to the point of heaviest fighting to assess the situation and coordinate the defenses. He saw an enemy position manned by 4 hostile soldiers placing heavy fire on his men and charged through a hail of bullets, killing the insurgents with accurate hand grenades and rifle fire. He quickly established a hasty perimeter and moved back to bring reinforcements to the forward positions. His Vietnamese counterpart was killed by the intense barrage and the men began to withdraw. But he stood up in the midst of the raging firefight and rallied his men to fight furiously against the determined attackers. Seeing two men fighting against a numerically superior element, he dashed to their side and helped kill 10 enemy soldiers within 10 meters of his position. Supporting aircraft were unable to pinpoint his location in the dense jungle, so he moved into the open to direct them with a handheld smoke grenade. Under cover of artillery and airstrikes, he led a withdrawal to a landing zone and personally carried a wounded comrade more than 600 meters on his back. Again, disregarding the savage fire, he led a carrying party back to the battle site and recovered all friendly casualties before leaving the area. Major Garrett also completed his bachelor's in business administration from the University of Nebraska in 1969. Fast forward to 1977, Chester Garrett was 35 and the executive officer for the Student Battalion, the School Brigade, Air Defense School for the U.S. Army at Fort Bliss, Texas. He also coached the basketball and baseball team at Fort Bliss. In his personal life, his stepson Roger was 18 and his son Patrick was 12. And unfortunately, he had recently separated from his 37-year-old wife Lisbeth and was dating a new woman. When Lisbeth learned of this new relationship, she became bitter and wanted revenge, and she used her son to achieve it. At this time, Lisbeth, 18-year-old Roger, and 12-year-old Patrick were living in the family home in El Paso, and Chester had moved into the bachelor officers' quarters at Fort Bliss. On the evening of January 3, 1977, a Monday night, Patrick thought it was weird when his mom asked him if he wanted to go to a movie, being a school night and all. But he wasn't going to pass up this chance to have some fun with his friend, Buddy Larson, and stay up late on a weeknight when normally he had to be in bed by 8:30 or 9 p.m. Lisbeth dropped the boys off at the movies and said she would be back to pick them up around 9:30. But 9:30 came and went, and Lisbeth still hadn't shown up to retrieve the boys. They decided to call Mrs. Larson, and she came to get the boys and dropped Patrick off at his home. The house was completely dark, and after Patrick knocked several times with no answer, he walked down the street to the Larsons' home to use their phone. He called his house, but got no answer, and stayed at his friend's house until he saw his front porch light turn on, and then returned home. Knocked on the door, and his brother Roger answered. At this time, Patrick noticed that besides the porch light, all the other lights in the home were off. But he had no option to think anything more, as Roger guided Patrick straight to his room and was told to go to bed, as it was a school night. The next morning, Patrick woke up to Roger standing in his doorway with a bowl of cereal, which he made him eat in his bedroom. And even though Patrick's normal routine before school was to take a shower, Roger wouldn't let him, and made him go to school without showering. When Roger picked him up from school, Patrick was told there had been an accident, and that their father was dead. The body of Chester Garrett was found on the morning of July 4th, about 8 a.m., by a truck driver. The truck driver noticed a Volkswagen parked about 100 yards in the desert west of Avenue of the Americas. When he went to inspect the car, he found the body of Garrett, laying in the back seat of the car wearing a tracksuit, and the whole back seat was covered in blood. Investigators who were called to the scene noticed several footprints and another set of car tracks in the area, but said there didn't appear to be any signs of a struggle. This led them to believe Garrett had not been killed at the site his body was found. Captain Max Stout stated, "There is a chance he could have been killed someplace else, but right now we just don't have enough to know where. From what we've learned, the man was real tough, a special forces type, almost what you'd call a Superman. Whoever got him must have been mighty tough too, and probably more than one, and probably took him by surprise. What they did know, that was sometime between 8 and 9 p.m. Monday, Garrett left his quarters at Fort Bliss, nodded hello to an acquaintance wearing his usual sweatsuit that his friends referred to as his after 5 attire, and drove away. The condition of his living quarters indicated that he had left in a hurry but intended to return, and that since his wallet had not been taken, robbery was ruled out as a motive. The medical examiner found that Chester had died of blunt force trauma to the head and multiple stab wounds to the body. Just a few days after his death, theories started surfacing as police had no new leads. One theory was that Garrett was murdered by a stranded motorist who had been seen earlier that same evening trying to flag down vehicles near the murder scene. Others theorized a gang overpowered the soldier and then took his body to another location. But the police, they had their own theory about the murder, that it was someone in the Garrett family. Their suspicion started the day Chester's body was found. At around 3 p.m. on January 4th, Glenn Hall, who worked at Fort Bliss, went to the Garrett home to notify the family. Lisbeth and Roger were present when he delivered the news. While there, Hall noticed something he found strange. The mother and son were wearing matching bathrobes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He also told the other investigators that their reaction to the news was fairly stoic, and that because Chester and Lisbeth's relationship was bitter at the time, all assumed Lisbeth to be a very likely suspect for the murder. Further evidence of her guilt came when she would not consent to a search of the family home. She finally agreed to let them search the residence on January 13th. The investigators observed a large chalky stain on the driveway coming underneath the garage door and from inside of the garage, and it appeared as though something had been washed out of the garage. Inside of the garage, they found a bottle of muriatic acid, and that the left side of the garage appeared to have been recently cleaned because it was still wet. There also appeared to be blood splatter on the garage wall. On that same day, Lisbeth, Roger, and Lisbeth's brother were called to testify before a grand jury to help cast light on the murder investigation, but no arrests were expected at this time. During Roger's testimony before the grand jury, he admitted to seeing his dad at the Garrett home on the evening of January 3, 1977, and stated Patrick was not there because they had dropped him off at the theater. His parents spoke privately while he shot the basketball outside. He then witnessed his parents walk out of the house and saw his dad drive away in his car that evening. When asked if he and his mom were aware that Chester was dating a woman, Roger answered yes, but denied any tensions between his parents during the divorce. He instead insisted that his mom had accepted the situation. The grand jury no-billed Roger Garrett on January 14, 1977. This means that the grand jury concluded there was insufficient evidence to indict an accused. This outcome results in immediate dismissal of the felony charge that was filed against the defendant in the criminal complaint. And just 10 days after Chester's death, his murder became a cold case. The Garrett family started to move on with their lives. Patrick mourning his father's death, Lisbeth feeling she got her revenge, and Roger struggling to keep silent about this terrible secret. In the summer of 1978, Roger was 19 when he met 16-year-old Deborah Rodriguez and became interested in dating her. But Deborah wanted to just be friends, as she was just about to enter her sophomore year of high school. In late October or early November of that year, Deborah and Roger were drinking beer alone in a park when Roger began talking about his father. He said there was something weighing heavily on him, and he was going to tell her a deep, dark secret. Roger, who was crying and upset, said that his mother told him Chester had been beating and abusing her, and she asked him, her son, to kill him. He explained that Chester was extremely fit, so they needed the element of surprise to succeed. Roger and Lisbeth first thought about shooting Chester during his daily run, but they abandoned that plan. Instead, they decided to lure Chester to a location where he could be surprised and knocked unconscious, so he would be unable to defend himself. Continuing, Roger detailed the events of the January 3, 1977 murder of his stepfather, explaining that he hid in a linen closet or washroom until Chester's back was to him, and he then knocked his stepdad unconscious by striking him in the back of the head with a large piece of wood like a baseball bat or 2x4. They also stabbed him with a knife to finish the job. But Deborah couldn't recall if Roger said it was him or his mother who used the knife. The mother and son then put Chester's body in the car and drove it out to a remote desert area of El Paso. At this point, Roger stopped talking, and the pair sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Deborah wasn't believing the story and felt Roger was just trying to get closer to her. So she asked, "Well, then why are you not in jail for the murder?" Roger replied that they had been suspects, but the police did not have any evidence against them. He then detailed to Deborah how they were able to get rid of the evidence. They cleaned the blood out of the garage using chemicals and mentioned he was surprised that none of the neighbors had noticed the residue as it ran out of the garage into the street because it was a strange color. Deborah Rodriguez did not go to the police with this story. She didn't believe one of her friends could do something like what Roger described, and believed he was just trying to get closer to her. She ended up leaving El Paso for about a year and lost contact with Roger Garrett until around 1991. After this, Roger was more successful at keeping quiet until 1990, when he went to visit his mom, Lisbeth, and little brother, Patrick. In December 1990, Patrick, 27, and his new wife, Jean, had been married for 2 months, had a baby on the way, and they were also living with his mom, Lisbeth, when Roger came for a visit. On that trip, Jean overheard Patrick asking questions about his dad Chester's murder. She knew he had gone to the library and had read articles about it, but felt he needed more answers. Patrick approached Roger and asked him about their dad's murder. But during the course of this discussion, Lisbeth arrived home, and when she heard what the boys were talking about, she got defensive and stated, "I raised a bunch of idiots." To which Roger replied, "No, you've raised a bunch of killers." The boys went outside onto the front porch to finish their conversation. Patrick told Roger that he was thinking about joining the army because he thought a war was coming and he wanted to serve his country like their father had done. Roger replied, "Guys get killed doing that." And so the conversation turned back to their father. Patrick, is there anything you wanted to tell me about our father? After this question, he noticed Roger's whole demeanor changed, and that he then reached out and put his arm around Patrick. Roger, Mom and I murdered Chester. We sent you to the movies that night to get you out of the house. Then we called Dad and told him the dishwasher was broken and needed him to come fix it. I placed a bat in the dining room before he arrived, and when Dad leaned over the dishwasher to see what was wrong with it, I came up behind him with the bat and struck him in the head as hard as I could. Then Mom stabbed him repeatedly with a knife. We dragged him into the garage, and when Chester began gasping for air and gurgling, Mom took the bat from me and crushed Chester's head with it. We then put Chester in his Volkswagen and drove him out to a street on the far east side of El Paso and left him in his car. We disposed of the evidence by putting our clothes, the baseball bat, and the knife in separate plastic bags and threw them away in trash bins at different convenience stores on the west side of El Paso. The brothers sat in silence after Roger's confession. Patrick did not call the police after this confession because he could not bring himself to turn in his family. But he did relay this story to his wife, Jean, and to his father-in-law. A year later, in 1991, Roger, now 32, resumed his friendship with Deborah Rodriguez. Deborah, if you remember from part 1 of this story, was the first person Roger confessed to, about a year after the murder. She didn't believe his story then because she thought he was just trying to get closer to her. In 1991, Deborah introduced Roger to one of her friends, Teresa Heffelfinger, but again, did not relay Roger's confession to her because she still did not believe it. Teresa and Roger began dating, but when he spoke to her about Chester's murder, he told her he believed Chester had been attacked by a gang while jogging. Roger and Teresa married on April 18, 1992. About 4 months into their marriage, the couple had a major argument, and Teresa brought up the subject of divorce. This led to Roger breaking down, and he confessed to her that he and Lisbeth had murdered Chester. He explained that Lisbeth and Chester were separated, and their arguments had become physical. Lisbeth convinced him that her life was in danger, but they weren't able to go to the police. On the day of the murder, they arranged for Patrick to be at a friend's house and then convinced Chester to come over to the house. Roger told Teresa that they had to catch Chester unaware, so he struck Chester with a baseball bat in the kitchen, and Chester asked, "Why are you doing this?" Lisbeth became enraged by this question and stabbed Chester. They dumped Chester's body in East El Paso and cleaned up the evidence at the house. Then they got rid of the knife and their clothing and changed the tires on their car. Teresa was shocked, but believed Roger's story. She did not call the police because she felt threatened when Roger said his mom, Lisbeth, could never know that he had confessed to her. He also told her that the authorities did not have evidence to prove they had murdered Chester. Teresa and Roger ended up getting divorced in 1993, and around that same time, Jean and Patrick also divorced. But things started to pick up for the case 2 years later in 1995. Patrick was in jail in Missouri on a charge of interference with child custody because he had taken his children without Jean's permission. This prompted Jean to call up Teresa, and in the course of this conversation, Teresa told Jean what Roger had confessed to her about the murder. Jean decided that now is the time to contact the police. And in turn, the police then contacted Teresa, and she gave them a statement. The detectives from the El Paso County Sheriff's Department then contacted Patrick while he was in prison, but Patrick denied that Roger had made any confession to him. He still could not bring himself to turn in his family to the police. The case went cold for 11 years until 2006, when it was reopened by the El Paso County Sheriff's Office as part of their occasional reviews of cold case files. The detectives tracked down Patrick Garrett to interview him again, but he continued to deny that Roger had confessed to the murder. With no new leads and Patrick sticking to his story, the case went cold again. In 2009, tragedy struck in Patrick's life. His 16-year-old son died of cancer, and just a year after that, his stepson passed away. He went into some deep soul-searching and found God, and knew what he had to do. He had to do the right thing. At the time of this decision, Patrick was unemployed and was living with Lisbeth in El Paso. She had been a teacher at Eastwood High School for the past 20 years. To live there, he had an agreement with his mom that she would handle the finances in exchange for his work on her house. At the beginning of January 2013, near the 36th anniversary of his father's murder, Patrick spoke with both Roger and his mother and tried to convince them to turn themselves in to the police. But both refused. After finding his faith, he believed that if he did not come forward, he would be just as guilty of the murder as Roger and Lisbeth. Patrick moved out of his mom's house on January 4th, 2013, and then contacted the sheriff's department to report that Roger had admitted to him that he and Lisbeth had murdered Chester. Patrick's written statement was dated January 5th, 2013. He was quoted later explaining his process like this: "I found out about this when my brother confessed to me back in 1990, and I had a little one on the way and a new wife. I just couldn't do it at that time. Plus, Mom scared the crap out of me. You don't understand. She was not the little 76-year-old woman at that time. You don't cross her, or you disappear." He continued, "It just wasn't the time. I took the death of my son in 2009 and the death of my stepson a year later. And when I found my faith, I knew what I had to do. It took about a year before I got my faith, and then I knew what I had to do. It just became so clear, and my faith tells me that knowing what I did, if I didn't do anything about it, I wouldn't be going to heaven, and I want to see my boys again, and I want to see my father." 1 month later, in February 2013, Roger Garrett, now 54, was arrested in Tennessee and was extradited back to El Paso. And Lisbeth's home was being searched, with all officers in full hazmat suits. Roger Garrett's trial started in October 2013. The state's lead witness was Patrick, but the defense tried to discredit him by bringing up some unusual aspects of his recent past, such as registering for the business name Hire a Liar. Patrick tried to explain this decision by saying there was an existing franchise business with that name, and the company would be required to pay him a fee if it ever attempted to open a franchise in El Paso. The defense then brought up emails Patrick had sent claiming that he had been in a facility known as the Underground in Carthage, Missouri, and had seen 2 alien, reptilian creatures. Roger's stepdaughter, Christine Meyerson, testified that Patrick told her in 2010 that he believed the president is an alien reptilian shapeshifter, and he had seen reptilian creatures in an underground storage facility in Carthage, Missouri. I decided I had to do a little research into this underground, and I was shocked to discover what it really was and that it had nothing to do with aliens. According to an article in Tin4 magazine, underground warehouses can be found in states of Missouri, Pennsylvania, New York, Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois. Most of these underground facilities occupy previous mining sites, which is a great second use for what some might consider useless or used-up space. It is a different feeling the first time you drive into one of these man-made caves, but they are usually painted white and well-lit. Carthage Underground is a collection of marble quarries in Carthage, Missouri. most of which are presently owned by Americold Logistics. They currently hold 43 million square feet of the quarry, much of which is occupied by warehouses or factories, primarily for food production. The total area of Carthage Underground is difficult to trace, but it has been rumored to stretch out as far as Joplin, Missouri, about 20 miles from Carthage. These underground facilities have so much to offer in regards to climate control, safety, and security. Some claim that these man-made caves will soon be the banks of tomorrow, a place where we will one day store our valuables, instead of a safety deposit box at our local bank branch. As we run out of usable space above the ground, these subterranean business complexes will continue to dig their way into the future. Now, if you are anything like me, you are a little disappointed as the information just mentioned didn't turn into a discussion about aliens. So I decided to do one more search and added aliens to the end of underground in Carthage, Missouri. This brought me upon a website called phantomsandmonsters.com that had an article detailing an alien encounter that occurred in the underground at Carthage. After reading the witness's experience, I realized I had stumbled upon more than just a random article, as when I scrolled down in the article, this is what I read next. Above was the initial report of the incident posted on the ufo.about.com forum. Below is the statement given by one of the witnesses, Pat Garrett. Yes, I actually stumbled upon Patrick Garrett's official alien story on his reptilian experience as reported to Mary Sutherland, BUFO Paranormal and UFO Radio. Location, date, near Carthage, Missouri, March 7th, 2004, afternoon. This is Patrick's story. This past Sunday, the 7th, a friend and I were riding 2 ATVs in a place called The Underground. It is a public and private storage facility in Carthage, Missouri. I worked there as a subcontractor some 9 years ago. I helped build the office spaces up on top. I started to explore then, about once a month, and did so all the way until this past Sunday. However, I never went as far or as deep before either. It was fun to take the ATVs and cruise underground. No rain or weather problems, ever. We are approximately 8 miles in, and I'd say maybe 500 feet deep, when we took a turn down an area that was marked Naval Authoritative Zone. I remember making a comment about the Navy getting a ship down there and said that was an easy posting. The walls became more defined, as in polished or finished, and this was striking because this was supposed to be a newly blasted area. Totally backward, I would think. Still thinking nothing was wrong, we kept going. Actually increasing speed because the floor was paved now, and we could go faster. We came up on an unusual painted pattern on the floor, and I thought, cool, graffiti. Kids have been down here. We're safe. Won't get into any trouble. The road dipped down, and then it took a 90-degree turn to the left. We had no warning, and we were going too fast. I knew we were going to hit the wall, but we didn't. We passed through some kind of projection of the cave siding, although I don't know how it was done. It was real looking. We passed into a whole new road system. This one was large and much older than where we came from. We started to smell an odor, musty, damp, growing stronger as we went deeper on the smell. The lighting decreased as well, probably 60% less than the other areas. We turned on our headlights. We continued on at about 5 to 7 miles an hour. for about 5 minutes, and we noticed it was getting cooler, which was to me very strange, since once inside a cave a certain distance, the temp stays the same. We made a right turn and started to come up on what I thought was a rest area on the side, about 40 feet away. I thought it looked like a pair of fountains until they moved. We both stopped immediately. We were approximately 30 feet away now, and what we saw were two creatures. One was very tall, at least 7 feet, maybe more, and very powerfully built, reddish in color, and the other was smaller, about 6 feet, but it was not red in color but pale, like an albino, and it was not as powerfully built as the other. They looked like reptiles, living, walking, intelligent beings, not human, not warm-blooded. Reptiles. I know it sounds crazy, but it is true. They said nothing, but I did get a strong sense from the big one, a malevolence, evil presence of some kind. My friend screamed, and we turned around, a power turn. We started to go back out when my friend said, "The big one," was after us. I looked back, and it was following us. I had the overwhelming feeling that if it caught us, that harm would come to us. We passed through the wall projection, and I looked back and saw the thing raise its arm, and it had a weapon of some sort. It fired and hit the ATV my friend was on. The engine died, and he stopped. I told him to jump on, and he did. I gunned it, and then my friend said, "Stop!" I slowed down, and he said, "Look!" I looked back, and the thing had stopped at the graffiti on the cave floor road. The ATV was on its side of the graffiti symbol. It was obvious the thing would not cross the marking. I slowed more. We were now about 75 feet away. I stopped, and the three of us, me, my friend, and the creature, reptile, man thing, just looked at each other for about 15 seconds. And let me tell you, that is a long time. Then I started to leave. It stayed there waiting and not moving until we were out of sight. As soon as we cleared the cave, I got on my cell phone and called the sheriff's department. I was told that they would not come out and that underground security would handle it. Then they hung up. By law, they are not to do that. We can hang up on anyone, but a government office, be it city or federal, cannot hang up on you. Anyway, I was shocked and scared, and we took off across the outside of the underground, over to my truck, and sure enough, underground security was waiting for us. We were told to leave, not to tell anybody about this, that if I come back, the Navy would press charges. I was also told that I had 10 minutes to leave, or I would be taken in. What can I say? We left. It has been 3 days since this has happened, and I am still shaken. I am a powerful person, 6'4", and 265 pounds, and I have never in my life been afraid for my life, until this past Sunday. I lost one of my 2 ATVs. As far as I know, it is still down there. My friend will not talk about it, and I have not heard anything from anyone about it. I did call the sheriff's department, and they said they never got a call from me. Well, that is my story. I have never had anything strange happen in my life, and I am very, very concerned about this. I can tell you this, I had an urge to kill the things I saw down there. I don't know if that is a natural reaction, as most people have a natural revulsion towards reptiles, or because of my faith and the feeling of evil I had, or what. All I know is that they are real, and I wish I could do something, anything, to combat or help against these things. Take care, all, and thank you again for letting me write this and share this experience. This article was posted in 2010. But on the stand, Patrick denied sending those emails, and his complete alien encounter was not brought up in court. Roger testified at trial on his own behalf and denied murdering Chester or telling anyone that he had killed his father. He specifically denied confessing to his friend Deborah Rodriguez, wife Teresa, or his brother Patrick that he had killed Chester. Roger said that he went to his friend's house at 11 a.m. on January 3, 1977, to help him with an English paper, before leaving at around 2:30 or 3 that afternoon. Roger told his friend that Patrick was going to a movie and Chester was going to come over to the house, so he would return later that evening to help him finish his paper. Roger and Lisbeth drove Patrick and his friend to the theater, but he stopped at his friend's house on the way and told him that he would return at 9:30 or 10 to help him with his paper. After returning home, Roger played basketball for a while, but lost track of time and did not leave the house to pick up Patrick and Larson from the movies until 9:30 or 9:35. He could not find them at the theater and returned home at around 10 o'clock. The house was completely dark and his mother was in bed. About 5 minutes after he turned on the porch light, Patrick came home from the Larsons' house. He sent Patrick straight to bed because it was a school night, and then called his friend and invited him to come over to finish his paper. But his friend's dad would not let him go. So Roger went to his friend's house and stayed there until about 1 a.m. The following day, Lieutenant Colonel Hall came to the house and notified them that Chester was dead. When Roger began crying, Hall told him that he needed to be a man and Chester was not even his real father. Roger recalled that his mother decided they needed to move. He explained that the neighbors, who they had never met, brought food and asked what had happened, but they did not say they were sorry for the Garrett's loss or that they would help if Roger needed to talk. Roger told his mother he did not like the neighbors and that they should move. Lisbeth told Roger and Patrick to clean the garage floor because it had oil and transmission fluid on it. Roger used muriatic acid to clean the floor because that was how his father had taught him. They started with the left side because it had more stains, but they were interrupted and did not do the right side until later. On cross-examination, Roger admitted that he never contacted the sheriff's department to find out the status of the investigation into his father's murder, nor did he maintain contact with his father's sisters after 1977. Roger admitted he did not have an alibi for 7:10 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. on the night of January 3, 1977. Roger Garrett was found guilty of murder in October 2013 and sentenced to 40 years in prison with a $5,000 fine. 2 years later, in October 2015, Lisbeth Garrett, now 76, went on trial. During the closing arguments, Lisbeth's defense lawyer, Richard Esper, asked the jury to sentence her to probation, stating, "An eye for an eye is not always a proper sentence. We have a woman who has reached the mortality rate for a woman. You will decide if she dies in prison or not. A sentence of 5 years probation means she will likely die on probation. A prison sentence means she will more than likely die without ever getting out. Any prison sentence is a life sentence," he added. "Prison is harsh for those that are young and strong. For someone old and weak, it can be excruciating." Prosecutor Denise Butterworth shot back in her closing remarks, asking the jury, what punishment would she get on community supervision, probation? It would mean she would go home and go back to living her normal life. She would just have to check in with her probation officer every now and then. You, the jury, are punishing a 76-year-old due to her own actions. This is not a probation case, and it wasn't in 1977. She added, "All of the reasons why you, the jury, are having to punish a 76-year-old is because of her actions. We are asking for 38 years because it has been 38 years since the crime was committed." She was found guilty, and it took the jury less than 2 hours to decide her punishment. Lisbeth was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Judge Marcos Lizargo briefly addressed Lisbeth Garrett after the sentence was handed down. "But the jury has found that you did your finding of guilty. I just wanted to comment to you that nobody, regardless of their standing in the community or qualifications or service to our country, deserves to die in the manner that Major Chester Garrett did. That's my opinion, and this now concludes the punishment portion of the trial." After the trial, Patrick Garrett was interviewed and said, "It is very bittersweet. It really is, but it's been a long time coming. Justice was served for my father, and that is the main thing. That is what it was all about. I wish I had done it a little earlier. I tried to say goodbye to my mom, but she doesn't want to talk to me, so this is it for me. I can get on with my life and close this chapter in my life and get on with the next chapter." Going on, he said, "It is difficult to testify against anybody in a murder trial, but when it's your own family, it is very tough, especially when they're looking at you like they want to put you 6 feet under the ground. But it was necessary, and I did what I had to do." If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button below. If you want to inquire about a commission, you can email Russell at russellstewart.art@gmail.com. You can watch Russell livestream his art on Twitch. And if you want to hear more true crime stories, you can subscribe to my podcast, Crimes of a Decade, a Texas true crime podcast. Now that we are done, make sure to wash the brush. Just beat the devil out of it.